This is not a normal episode. This is more of a life update and a short-term podcast announcement. So it's just me, and I don't have my mic with me. I just have my webcam on my laptop because I'm not currently home right now, and I forgot to bring it. For those that don't want to hear the rigmarole, the upshot is Trails in the Pod will be going on a short-term hiatus, probably about a month, maybe a little bit longer than that, depending on how long I take things to get sorted. The reason why is that I'm moving to Philadelphia, and everything is so short-term, everything's happening so quickly that it'll be difficult for me to balance the podcast. So if that's all you needed to know, you can turn right off. You have the information that you need. So the rest of you guys who want to hear the more full story, I'll just speak a little bit about what's going on, what happened, what the next month or so looks likely to be like, and how I found myself in this situation. I'm not going to edit this or anything really. Maybe if I take too long have too many ums or take too long in between sentences, but I'm just going to talk. So as you guys know, this past year, I've been trying to find an academic job. I've been applying to a bunch of different universities. I got close at one point to move to a college in Ohio, but it didn't end up working out. And then my contract at Cornell ended. I've been working part-time at a summer school with special ed kids, which is nice to get some experience, but is not a long-term thing, even in terms of just pay, just not a long-term thing. And I've been struggling to figure out what to do next. Different directions people are kind of pulling me in. My sister, who makes a hell of a lot more money than I do, has been trying to get me to get my Salesforce administrator certification, because then she could help me find a Salesforce admin job that would pay lots of money and I could work from home. And while that sounds great on paper, teaching myself Salesforce, of course I'm almost done with it, but it is some of the most boring things I've experienced in my life. Ranking, going to deal with special education children in the morning versus coming home and learning how to use Salesforce. That using Salesforce was less fun than the kids who are literally barking in my face. I mean, literally making dog noises and cat noises to show their affection for me. It's been a wacky summer, guys. Lots of positive and negative experiences. I've always had a Latin background, and I don't mean that I'm from Latin America. I mean that I've known Latin since I was 14 years old, is when I was forced to learn it in high school. I wanted to take French in order to talk to chicks, but my principal decided that everybody in my year had to take Latin because it was going to help us on the SAT, and I was going to be a video game programmer, so I dropped French so I could take computer programming, after a year of which I dropped that too because I hate math. So I was stuck with Latin, and I eventually learned to love it, and then went on to do my undergrad in classics and then my graduate studies in classics, and now here I am. I wasn't looking for a teaching job, though, because I'm not certified. Cornell doesn't have a school of education. There are ways to start earning your certification with some post-secondary experience that I was starting to investigate. How that all works, but it was also coming to the time where school year is going to start, so get a job now or wait for the next year. So I really had no idea what I was doing. I was not doing a good job finding anything, and really falling into a depression because of it. One of my very good friends, who I've known since undergrad, we did classics at FSU together, and then he came up to Cornell and did his PhD in French. He's moving to Philadelphia. And so I had him over, as like a final, hey man, I'm not going to see you for a while. I'll make dinner. We'll play Pokemon Stadium 2 like we always do for like a last hurrah kind of thing. And he, moving to Philadelphia, obviously he needs a job. And so he was talking to a charter school down here that really puts emphasis on Latin education, on teaching students from the beginning, the value of the humanities in order to educate them and oh my fucking God. How many times are people going to interrupt me while I'm doing this? Putting it on Do Not Disturb. Okay. But the emphasis is on using Latin along with other subjects to really educate young men and young boys and turn them into men, is their statement. We educate boys and graduate men. But my friend Rick was getting spooked by it. because the school had been undergoing a large amount of staff turnover ever since COVID. Things weren't really in the best place, and I think he had in his head that if it's a charter school that specializes in Latin, that it's going to be like highfalutin, everybody's going to be super into it, and everybody's invested, kind of a higher class type of a deal. Basically college but younger is what he was hoping for. And he was told by the head of the Latin department that that is not at all how this works. That's not how public education works. It's a charter school, but public facing. There's no tests to get in or anything like that. It serves the underprivileged community of West Philadelphia. And those of us who have watched The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air and know that theme song know what that means. And so it spooked him. He started looking for a reason not to take the job. And, we're drinking bourbon, and he's looking at me. And one thing, I don't remember how much I've mentioned it in the podcast, but my middle school, my high school, they've all been inner city. Obviously, my college wasn't. FSU isn't inner city. And then I went to Cornell for my PhD. But, my middle school, my high school, all public, in the bad part of town, as we might say. And my middle school definitely wasn't like that academically rigorous. My high school was because of special programs. But I have experience with this population, just living in it. I don't expect students to come to my classroom desiring to know the secrets of Latin, because when I started Latin, I fucking hated it. I hated it, and I had to be convinced to like it by discovering sexual puns in poetry. I read some Catullus that was talking about dirty jokes, and that's when I decided that I really wanted to get into it. So I was just much better equipped personality-wise to teach at a school like this. And on top of that, I've actually taught Latin. Rick has not. Rick knows Latin. We did classics together, but then he went off and he did French stuff. He's taught a lot of French. He's never taught Latin. I have. So in every way imaginable, I'm better qualified for this position. I just never looked into it. And so he emailed them the next day and said that he didn't want it. He had found something else, which is a lie. He hasn't found anything else, though he still moved to Philadelphia. And he sent my resume off to them, recommending that they interview me, which they have done. That happened a week ago. And so I've just gotten the job offer today. That's why I waited until now to record this. It's a good job offer. It's more money than I've ever made in my life. I mean, granted, it's still a teacher salary, so let's not get it twisted. It's not a huge amount of money, but the max I've ever made is $45K, and this is more than that by a good solid amount. So I'm very happy about that. It's free health care. There's retirement in there, paid holidays, some personal time off. It's also a way for me to start a career in education, because I'm not certified, but there are ways for them to get me into the classroom as what they're calling a long-term substitute, and then they would facilitate me actually getting a teacher certification. On top of that, I've been in Ithaca for 8 years. It's a small town filled with graduate students, and I'm not a graduate student anymore. It's time for me to go. It's time for me to start a new chapter. I have a ton of friends there, but the problem with friends that you make in graduate school is that they all eventually leave. You're supposed to leave. The fact that I've been here for a little bit longer than usual is not the normal thing. My best friend just went back to Italy, and we stayed through graduate school into our one-year lecturership. We shared an office together. But at the end of the day, even he has had to leave. Every year, the amount of friends that I have, at least that I have good, close personal friendships with, they leave. They go away. It's my turn to do that too. But at the same time, I have some friends here in Philly. Rick here is in Philly. Another friend of mine is also here. I'm staying in his apartment right now. And ironically, he's also from FSU Classics. So like the FSU Classics people just seem to come to Philly. So that's pretty rad. But the orientation for this job starts on Tuesday. I'm recording this Wednesday, August 7th. The orientation starts Tuesday, August 12th. So I have very little time to find an apartment. There's no way that I can just move everything this weekend and get down here, which means that what's going to happen is during the week, I'm doing my professional development or getting orientated or even starting teaching, depending on everything. And then in the weekends, I'm back in Ithaca, moving my shit, packing stuff up, putting it into a pod maybe, or finding some way to get it down here. Of course, that's after I found an apartment, which I haven't found yet because I just got offered the job now. And you can't really apartment hunt until you know how much they're going to pay you. I mean, I did some preliminary stuff, but you can't really do it until you know how much money you're going to make. On top of that, I still have to give one final academic paper on August 25th to honor the retirement of one of my old professors. And I have not written this thing yet because every time I'm about to sit down to write it, something big happens. Like, hey, come down to Philadelphia to get a job. So I need to find time to write that. All of this is to say that the rest of the month of August is going to be exhaustingly busy. And so the one thing that I can easily put off, that needs to be put off in order to make time for everything else, is the podcast. It's kind of a bad time to put it on a hiatus because Kevin's already beaten the game, or mostly beaten the game since he didn't beat the final boss, but he's already been through all of that. I haven't done it yet. So we can't just sit down and talk about it. I mean, I could talk about my memories or I could watch cutscenes, but I don't think that's really what you guys want. You guys want the in-depth stuff. He's probably going to have to rewatch cutscenes when we could finally get back to this. That's a good idea, actually. I'm going to make sure that he does that. But yeah, no, it's a bad time for that. We normally like to beat stuff at around the same time and then talk about it so that there's not so much of a gap. Never has there been a month gap between when somebody has beaten it and when we actually talk about it. And it might be for longer because I don't know how long it's going to be for me to set everything up and to get settled, because on top of moving and on top of getting started at that job, I have to learn how to be a teacher. I mean, I've been a teacher in university, but that's a different skill set. I can curse at my students in university. I can't curse at these students. If I do that, I'll get fired. And how many times have I said the word shit in this episode? Gotta rein it in. I gotta learn how to rein it in. I gotta learn new classroom management techniques. I have to learn what standards are. I need to learn how to teach Latin at a slower pace than I've taught it before, because it's not the university level, it's high school. There's a lot of things that I'm going to need to get used to, on top of moving an apartment and probably furnishing an apartment and figuring out how to live my life down here, that it really is better just at least the next month, maybe month and a half, maybe two, I don't know, to take a break from the podcast. But the podcast isn't going anywhere. We're going to come back. We've had stretches like this before. It's just that this time I have the wherewithal to warn you guys ahead of time. This entire year has been filled of, yeah, we would have gotten this done, but real life got in the way for me again. And every time we hit a new high or we get into a groove, like last month, we got almost 1,800 downloads, the most that we've ever gotten. And so I was looking forward to, riding that momentum and pushing it up this month. And that is not going to happen. It just can't. Which is the exact same thing that happened after our previous peak in January of this year. But it's just how it goes sometimes. I really appreciate everybody that doesn't get mad when I have to take breaks like this. I'm hoping that this is going to be the start of a new chapter of a stable job, that I can do the job and then come home and live my life, which academia is not that. At least not in the stage that I was, because it was, okay, do my job, now figure out ways to find another job for the next year. It's completely unstable. I'm 30. I'm tired of instability. I want to have a job that I enjoy, hobbies that I like, be around the people that I like, and hopefully find love in a family and all that stuff too. So now you guys know why for the next month or so we're just not going to be around. I'll try to post on Twitter a little bit, but I have a lot of transitioning to do. So you guys be well. We'll be back maybe September, maybe a little bit after that. I'm not quite sure. But obviously I'll keep you all updated and stuff like that. All right. Thanks very much for listening. We'll see you guys next time.